A woman's face, swollen, purple along the cheekbone, one eye nearly sealed shut. She's gripping the sink so hard her knuckles have gone white. Behind the locked bathroom door, glass shatters. A man's voice, slurred and vicious, promising things that make her flinch. This is Alara Vance, 28 years old, waitress by day, punching bag by night. And tonight, something inside her finally breaks. Not her spirit, but the last thread of denial holding her to this life. If you want to see how she escapes the monster she married, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. The bathroom light flickered once, twice, then settled into a sickly yellow hum that made everything look worse than it already was. Alara stood with both hands braced against the sink, staring at the stranger in the mirror. Blood crusted beneath her nose. Her lip had split clean through on the left side. The bruise spreading across her cheekbone was the kind of deep purple that would turn green by morning, then yellow by the weekend. A timeline she knew too well. She touched it gingerly, winced, pulled her hand back. From the other side of the door came the wet cough and stumble of Ronan Hale trying to navigate their narrow hallway. Something heavy hit the wall. He swore, low and mean, the kind of cursing that had teeth in it. Alara's breath caught. She'd locked the bathroom door. She remembered doing it. But now, staring at the flimsy brass knob, she couldn't remember if it had actually clicked into place or if she'd just thought it had. Her hands were shaking too hard to check. Everything was shaking. Her hands, her knees, the floor beneath her bare feet. Alara. His voice came through the door like smoke under a crack. Soft now, almost gentle. That was worse than the yelling. When Ronan got quiet, that meant he was thinking, and when he thought too long, things escalated. She didn't answer. "Baby, come on, open the door." She pressed her lips together, tasted copper. The split reopened. Fresh blood pooled on her tongue. "I know you're upset," he continued, and she could hear him leaning against the doorframe now, the wood creaking under his weight. "I didn't mean to. You know I didn't mean it. You pushed me, Elle. You know how I get when you push me." Her throat closed. She wanted to scream that she hadn't pushed him, that all she'd done was ask him to eat something before he finished the bottle, that she'd been trying to help. But she'd learned years ago that logic didn't work on drunk men. It just gave them something to argue with. So she stayed silent, counted her breaths. 1, 2, 3. "Fine," Ronan said, and his voice hardened. "Stay in there. See if I give a damn." Footsteps retreated. A door slammed. Their bedroom, probably. Then the apartment went quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the distant wail of sirens somewhere out in the city. Alara exhaled slowly and turned on the faucet. Cold water hit her cupped palms and she splashed it over her face, careful around the bruises, gasping when it stung the cut on her lip. She did it again. And again. Until her face was numb and dripping and she could almost pretend the woman in the mirror was someone else. Someone stronger. Someone who didn't flinch at the sound of footsteps. She dried her face with a towel that smelled like mildew and bleach, then unlocked the door as quietly as she could. The hallway was dark. Ronan's bedroom door was closed, a strip of light visible underneath. She could hear him moving around in there, muttering to himself. She didn't wait to hear what he was saying. She went straight to the couch, her bed for the night, as it had been for the last 3 months, and lay down fully clothed, pulling the thin blanket up to her chin. The couch smelled like beer and old sweat and regret. She closed her eyes and tried to will herself into sleep, but every creak of the floorboards made her pulse spike. It took hours. When she finally drifted off, it wasn't real sleep. It was the shallow, restless kind where you're half aware of everything around you, waiting for the next disaster. Her alarm went off at 5:30. She silenced it immediately, heart hammering, listening for any sign that Ronan had woken up. Nothing, just his wet, rattling snore from behind the bedroom door. She got up, grabbed the clothes she'd laid out the night before, and locked herself in the bathroom again. This time she didn't look in the mirror. She just stripped off yesterday's shirt and jeans, stuffed them into the hamper, and pulled on her work uniform. Black slacks, white button-down, the little black vest with the restaurant's gold crest embroidered over the left breast. She brushed her teeth, ran a comb through her hair, twisted it into a bun at the base of her skull. Then finally, she allowed herself one glance at the mirror. The bruise was worse in daylight, darker, angrier. Makeup wasn't going to cover it. She tried anyway. Concealer, foundation, powder. She layered it on thick, blending carefully, but the purple still showed through like a stain. She added more powder, then more. It didn't help. If anything, it made her look like a corpse, pale and chalky and wrong. She gave up, wiped most of it off, and settled for just enough to take the edge off. People would notice. They always noticed. But as long as she kept her head down and didn't make eye contact, most of them wouldn't say anything. That was the deal. The unspoken social contract. Don't ask, don't tell, don't make it awkward. She grabbed her bag, checked her phone. No messages, no missed calls, and slipped out of the apartment as quietly as she could. The hallway outside smelled like garbage and someone's burnt toast. She took the stairs instead of the elevator because the elevator made noise, and noise meant risk. Outside, the city was just starting to wake up. Streetlights flickered off one by one as the sky turned from black to deep blue to pale gray. A garbage truck rumbled past, brakes squealing. Somewhere a dog barked. Alara walked fast, head down, hands shoved deep in her pockets. The restaurant was only 6 blocks away, but it felt like miles. Every shadow made her jump. Every car that slowed near the curb made her stomach twist. She didn't relax until she pushed through the heavy glass door of Marchand's, and the familiar smell of fresh bread and brewed coffee wrapped around her like a blanket. "Morning, Alara." She looked up. Marco, one of the line cooks, was setting up the expo station, his broad back to her. He didn't turn around, didn't wait for a response, just kept working. "Morning," she said quietly, and slipped past him into the back. The staff locker room was empty. She shoved her bag into her assigned cubby, checked her reflection one more time in the small mirror taped to the inside of the door. The bruise was still there, still visible. But in the dim light of the locker room, it didn't look quite as bad. She shut the door and went to work. Marchand's was the kind of restaurant where people proposed, where they celebrated promotions and anniversaries and closed business deals. The kind of place where a single dinner could cost more than Alara made in a week. The dining room was all white tablecloths and low lighting, and soft jazz piped in through hidden speakers. The waitstaff moved like shadows, seen but not noticed, present but invisible. Alara was good at being invisible. She took orders without making eye contact, delivered plates without speaking unless spoken to, refilled water glasses and cleared appetizer plates, and smiled politely when someone made a joke she didn't understand. She was efficient, professional, forgettable. That was the goal. Stay small. Stay quiet. Don't draw attention. It worked, for the most part. A few customers glanced at her bruise, their eyes lingering just a second too long before they looked away. One older woman, her hair shellacked into a silver helmet, frowned and opened her mouth like she was going to say something. But her husband touched her wrist, shook his head slightly, and she closed her mouth and went back to her menu. Alara kept moving. Lunch service blurred into dinner prep. She took her 15-minute break in the alley behind the kitchen, standing in the cold with her back against the brick wall, smoking a cigarette she'd bummed off Marco even though she didn't really smoke. It gave her an excuse to be outside, to breathe air that didn't smell like food and people and expectations. She stubbed the cigarette out halfway through and went back inside. Dinner service started at 6. The dining room filled quickly. Businessmen in tailored suits, women in cocktail dresses, couples leaning across tables with their fingers intertwined. Alara moved through the chaos with practiced ease, balancing trays, memorizing orders, adjusting her smile to match the mood of each table. At 7:15, Marcus, the floor manager, appeared at her elbow. "Table 12, he said, jerking his chin toward the far corner of the dining room. "VIP, handle it." She nodded and grabbed 2 menus. Table 12 was tucked into a private alcove, half hidden by a decorative screen, reserved for high rollers. Politicians, celebrities, people who wanted to be seen but not too seen. She approached with her head down, menus pressed against her chest. "Good evening. Welcome to..." She looked up and froze. The man sitting at the table wasn't looking at the menu. He was looking at her, directly at her. His eyes, pale gray, sharp as broken glass, locked onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. He was older than her, mid-30s maybe. Dark hair, neatly trimmed, expensive suit, tailored so precisely it looked like it had been painted on. A face that was handsome in a cold, carved kind of way, all hard angles and shadows. He didn't smile. "Good evening," he said. His voice was low, smooth, the kind of voice that made you lean in to hear it better. "Sit." She blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Sit down." It wasn't a request. Alara glanced over her shoulder, half expecting Marcus to materialize and tell her to stop wasting time. But the floor was busy, everyone focused on their own tables, their own chaos. She looked back at the man. I can't. I'm working." "I know." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit anyway." She hesitated, heart pounding. Every instinct screamed at her to walk away, to call Marcus, to do literally anything except obey this stranger's command. But there was something in his eyes, not cruelty exactly, but a kind of absolute certainty. Like he knew she would sit down, like there was no other option. Slowly she lowered herself into the chair. He studied her for a long moment, his gaze moving over her face with clinical precision. He didn't flinch when he saw the bruise, didn't look away, just observed. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Alara?" "Alara," he repeated, tasting the syllables. "Who did that to your face?" Her stomach dropped. It's nothing. I'm fine." "That's not what I asked." She swallowed hard. Her hands were trembling in her lap, and she pressed them flat against her thighs to make them stop. "I fell." "No, you didn't. Alara." He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, hands steepled beneath his chin. "I'm going to ask you one more time. Who did that to your face?" "Why do you care?" The words came out sharper than she intended, edged with panic and frustration and something dangerously close to tears. He didn't answer right away, just kept watching her with those pale, unreadable eyes. Then he said, very quietly, "Because I'm going to kill him." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and certain. Alara's pulse hammered in her ears. She should laugh. She should stand up and walk away and report this psychopath to Marcus. But she didn't do any of those things, because when she looked into his eyes, she didn't see a joke. She didn't see exaggeration or bravado or empty threats. She saw promise. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "No," he agreed. "Not yet." Before she could respond, Marcus appeared at her shoulder, his expression tight with barely concealed panic. "Alara, what are you—" "Mr. Darko, I'm so sorry. She's new. She didn't—" "She's fine," the man, Darko, said without looking at Marcus. "Leave us." Marcus hesitated, clearly torn between professional courtesy and self-preservation. Self-preservation won. He backed away with a muttered apology and disappeared into the crowd. Alara stared at Darko. "Who are you?" "Lucien Darko." He said it like she should recognize the name. When she didn't react, something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "You really don't know, do you?" "Should I?" "Most people do." "I'm not most people." "No," he said softly. "You're not." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. Thick, expensive stock, embossed with black lettering. He slid it across the table toward her. She didn't pick it up. "When you're ready to leave him," Lucien said, "call me." I don't need—" "Yes, you do." He stood, buttoning his jacket with smooth, practiced movements. "And when you finally admit that to yourself, I'll be waiting." He dropped 3 crisp $100 bills on the table, far more than the cost of a meal he hadn't ordered, and walked away without looking back. Alara sat frozen, staring at the business card. Her hands were shaking again. Her heart was racing. Every rational part of her brain was screaming that this was insane, that she needed to throw the card away and forget this ever happened. But she didn't. She picked it up, folded it carefully, and slipped it into her pocket. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. She moved through the motions mechanically, taking orders, delivering food, clearing plates, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. She kept replaying the conversation, turning it over and over like a puzzle she couldn't solve. "I'm going to kill him." The certainty in his voice. The cold, absolute promise of it. She should be horrified. She should be afraid. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. By the time her shift ended at 11, her feet ached and her head throbbed, and the bruise on her face had settled into a dull, constant pain. She changed out of her uniform, grabbed her bag, and stepped out into the cold night air. The walk home felt longer than usual. Every shadow seemed darker, every sound louder. She kept her hand wrapped around the business card in her pocket, the sharp edges pressing into her palm. When she finally reached her apartment building, she stood outside for a long moment, staring up at the third-floor window. The lights were off. Ronan was either passed out or not home. Either option was fine. She climbed the stairs slowly, keys already in hand, unlocked the door as quietly as possible, stepped inside. The apartment was dark and silent. She exhaled, made it through the living room, past the couch, toward the bathroom, and then the light flicked on. Ronan was sitting in the armchair by the window, a bottle dangling from one hand. His eyes were bloodshot and mean. "Where the hell have you been?" Her stomach twisted. "Work. You know I work late on—" "Don't lie to me." He stood, swaying slightly, and crossed the room in 3 long strides. "I called the restaurant. They said you left an hour ago." Her mind raced. She had left an hour ago, but she'd walked slowly, stopped at the corner store for cigarettes she didn't smoke, killed time because she didn't want to come home. "I stopped to get groceries," she said, keeping her voice level. "Where are they?" "What?" "The groceries, Alara. Where the hell are they?" She didn't have an answer. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Ronan's face twisted. "You're lying! You're a lying little—" He grabbed her arm, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise, and yanked her toward him. She stumbled, dropped her bag, tried to pull away. And his other hand came up fast, open-palmed, aimed at her face. She flinched, eyes squeezing shut, bracing for impact. It didn't come. She opened her eyes. Ronan was frozen, his hand still raised, staring at something behind her. She turned. Lucien Darko stood in the doorway. He was wearing the same suit from the restaurant, but now his tie was loosened and his sleeves were rolled up to his elbows. He looked calm, relaxed even, except for his eyes. His eyes were cold and empty and utterly, terrifyingly focused. "Let her go," Lucien said quietly. Ronan's grip on her arm tightened. "Who the hell are you?" "I won't ask again." "This is my home, my wife. Get out before I—" Lucien moved. One moment he was standing in the doorway. The next he was across the room, his hand locked around Ronan's wrist. He squeezed. Something cracked. Bone or cartilage, Alara couldn't tell. And Ronan screamed. Lucien twisted his wrist and Ronan went down hard, knees hitting the floor with a wet thud. Lucien didn't let go. Just stood over him, expression calm, holding Ronan's broken wrist at an angle that made him whimper. "If you ever touch her again," Lucien said, his voice soft and conversational, "I will come back. And next time I won't stop at your wrist. Do you understand?" Ronan nodded frantically, tears streaming down his face. "Say it!" I understand." "Good." Lucien released him and stepped back. Ronan collapsed onto his side, cradling his wrist against his chest, sobbing. Lucien turned to Alara. "Get your things." She stared at him, frozen. "Now, Alara." Her body moved before her brain caught up. She grabbed her bag from where it had fallen, stumbled into the bedroom, threw clothes into a duffel. She didn't even know what she was packing, just grabbed whatever she could reach. Shoes, toothbrush, the photo of her mother she kept in the nightstand drawer. When she came back out, Lucien was waiting by the door. Ronan was still on the floor, rocking back and forth, muttering something she couldn't make out. Lucien held out his hand. She took it, and together they walked out of the apartment and into the night. Trump. His car was parked at the curb, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than Alara had made in her entire life. He opened the passenger door for her, waited until she was settled, then closed it gently and walked around to the driver's side. The interior smelled like leather and something faintly spicy. Clean. Expensive. Lucien started the engine and pulled away from the curb without a word. Alara sat in silence, hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead. Her mind was blank. No thoughts. No feelings. Just static. "Where are we going?" she asked finally. "My place? I can't just—" "You can." He glanced at her, then back at the road. "And you will." She should argue. She should demand he take her somewhere else, a friend's place, a hotel, anywhere but his home. But she didn't have any friends. Not anymore. Ronan had made sure of that years ago, so she nodded and said nothing. The drive took 20 minutes. They left the cramped, run-down streets of her neighborhood behind and climbed into the hills where the houses were set back from the road, hidden behind gates and tall hedges. Lucian turned into an underground garage beneath a high-rise building that gleamed like a knife against the night sky. He parked, came around to open her door, and led her to a private elevator. They rode up in silence. The numbers on the display climbed, 10, 20, 30, until they reached the top floor and the doors slid open directly into a penthouse apartment. Alara stepped out and stopped. The space was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city, a sprawl of light stretching to the horizon. The furniture was minimal but expensive. Dark wood, leather, glass. Everything clean and sharp and perfectly arranged. "Guest room is down the hall," Lucian said, gesturing to the left. "Bathroom's connected. There's food in the kitchen if you're hungry." She nodded mutely. He studied her for a moment, then reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers brushed the bruise on her cheek and she flinched. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "I promise you that." Her throat closed. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly it hurt. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" His hand dropped. He took a step back, slipping his hands into his pockets, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked almost uncertain. "Because," he said finally, "I know what it's like to feel trapped." Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing through a door at the far end of the apartment. Alara stood alone in the enormous living room, clutching her duffel bag, and finally, let herself cry. She didn't sleep that night. The guest room was bigger than her entire apartment. The bed was soft, the sheets crisp and clean, the pillow like a cloud. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ronan's face, heard his screams, felt his fingers digging into her arm. And beneath that, quieter but insistent, she heard Lucien's voice. "I'm going to kill him." She should be terrified. She should call the police, report what happened, get as far away from Lucien Darko as possible. But she didn't. Because when she thought about going back, about walking into that apartment, about facing Ronan again, her chest tightened until she couldn't breathe. And when she thought about staying here, in this clean, quiet place where no one would hurt her, she could breathe again. So she lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and waited for morning. When dawn finally broke, pale gray light filtering through the blinds, she got up and padded quietly into the hallway. The apartment was silent. No sign of Lucien. She found the bathroom, splashed cold water on her face, and studied herself in the mirror. The bruise looked worse in daylight, darker, angrier. But beneath it she saw something else. A spark, small, fragile, barely there, but real. She dried her face, left the bathroom, and went to find Lucien. He was in the kitchen, standing at the stove with his back to her, cooking something that smelled like bacon and coffee. He was barefoot, wearing dark slacks and a white t-shirt, his hair slightly mussed. He looked normal, almost human. "Sit," he said without turning around. She sat at the island, folding her hands in her lap. A minute later, he slid a plate in front of her, scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, toast. A mug of coffee appeared next to it, steam curling from the surface. "Eat," he said, leaning against the counter across from her. She picked up the fork, took a small bite. The eggs were perfect, fluffy, seasoned, just right. She took another bite, then another. Before she knew it, the plate was empty. Lucien watched her the entire time, his expression unreadable. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded. "What happens now?" she asked. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you want to go back." Her stomach twisted. "I don't." "Then you stay." It was that simple. No conditions, no expectations, just a statement of fact. She looked down at her empty plate. "I don't understand. You don't know me. Why would you—" "I told you," he interrupted. "I know what it's like to feel trapped. But no more questions." He straightened, walked around the island, and stopped in front of her. "You're safe here. That's all you need to know." She looked up at him, searching his face for cracks, for lies, for anything that would tell her this was too good to be true. But all she saw was certainty. and for the first time in years she felt something shift inside her chest. Not quite hope, not yet, but close. Days blurred together. Ilara stayed in the penthouse, moving through the space like a ghost. Lucien came and went, meetings, phone calls, business she didn't ask about. When he was home, they existed in a strange, careful orbit around each other. He cooked, she cleaned. They spoke rarely, and when they did, the conversations were brief and practical. But she noticed things. The way he always made sure there was food she liked in the fridge. The way he left the guest room door open at night so she'd know she could call for him if she needed. The way he never touched her without asking first. It should have felt suffocating, living in a stranger's home, dependent on his goodwill. But it didn't. It felt quiet, safe. For the first time in 5 years, she slept through the night. On the 4th day, her phone rang. She stared at the screen. Ronan's name flashed in bold letters. Her hands started shaking. Lucien appeared in the doorway, his gaze sharp. Don't answer it. He'll just keep calling. Let him. The phone rang 3 more times, then went silent. A minute later, it buzzed with a voicemail notification. Ilara's thumb hovered over the play button. Ilara. Lucien's voice was quiet but firm. Don't. She looked up at him. What if he can't hurt you anymore? You don't know that. Yes, Lucien said, crossing the room in 3 long strides. I do. He took the phone from her hand, turned it off, and set it on the counter. Then he crouched in front of her, his pale eyes level with hers. He's nothing, Lucien said softly. A drunk, a coward. And if he comes near you again, I will end him. Do you understand? She nodded, throat tight. Say it. I understand. Good. He stood, handed her phone back. Now forget about him. But she couldn't, because 2 hours later someone knocked on the apartment door. Lucien was in his office. Ilara froze in the living room, heart hammering. The knock came again, louder this time. She walked slowly to the door, looked through the peephole, and her blood turned to ice. Ronan stood in the hallway, his face bruised and swollen, his wrist wrapped in a crude splint. He looked like hell, and he looked furious. Ilara, he shouted, pounding on the door. I know you're in there. Open the goddamn door. She stumbled back, hand over her mouth. Behind her, Lucien's office door opened. He emerged, his expression calm, and walked past her to the door. Lucien, don't... He unlocked the door and pulled it open. Ronan's eyes widened. For a split second, he looked genuinely afraid. Then his face twisted into something ugly and desperate. You, he spat. You think you can just take my wife and... Lucien punched him. One clean, brutal hit to the center of Ronan's face. His nose shattered with a wet crunch, and he went down hard, blood pouring from his nostrils. Lucien stepped into the hallway, crouched over him, and grabbed a fistful of his hair. Listen very carefully, he said, his voice low and cold. If I see you again, if I even hear your name, I will kill you. Not quickly, not cleanly. I will make it last. Do you understand? Ronan whimpered, nodding frantically. Lucien released him and stood. Get out of my building! Ronan scrambled to his feet and ran, blood dripping from his face, leaving a trail down the hallway. Lucien stepped back into the apartment, closed the door, and locked it. Then he turned to Ilara. She was pressed against the wall, trembling, tears streaming down her face. It's done, he said quietly. But they both knew it wasn't. Not yet. The blood on the hallway floor was still wet when Lucien turned the deadbolt. His knuckles were split, red smeared across the ridges, but he didn't seem to notice. He walked past Ilara without a word, went straight to the kitchen sink, and ran cold water over his hand. She stood frozen against the wall, her chest heaving, trying to pull air into lungs that felt too small. The apartment was silent except for the rush of water and the hammer of her pulse in her ears. You shouldn't have opened the door, she finally managed. Lucien shut off the tap, grabbed a dish towel, wrapped it around his hand. He was going to break it down. You didn't have to hit him. He looked at her then, his pale eyes sharp. Yes, I did. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that violence only made things worse, that Ronan would come back angrier, that this was all spiraling out of control. But the words died in her throat because she knew, deep down, in the part of herself she didn't like to acknowledge, that she was glad Lucien had hit him. Glad Ronan was bleeding and afraid, and that realization made her stomach turn. "He'll call the police," she said quietly. "No, he won't." "How do you know?" Lucien dried his hand carefully, then tossed the towel onto the counter. "Because men like him don't call the police. They know what happens when someone starts asking questions." "What does that mean?" He didn't answer, just walked past her toward his office. "Lucien," her voice cracked. "What does that mean?" He stopped in the doorway, his back to her. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he turned, and the look on his face made her breath catch. Not anger, but something colder, something final. "It means your husband has done things," Lucien said quietly. "Things that would put him in a cage for a very long time if anyone looked too closely. And he knows I know. So no, Alara, he won't call the police." Her knees went weak. She pressed her back harder against the wall to keep from sliding down. "How do you—" "I make it my business to know." He stepped toward her, slow and deliberate, until he was close enough that she could see the faint scar at the corner of his jaw. "Do you want to know what he's done? The women he's hurt? The deals he's made with people who would slit his throat for a few $100s? Stop. Or do you want to keep pretending he's just some drunk who got a little rough sometimes?" "Stop." Her voice broke. Tears burned hot behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Lucien's expression softened slightly. He reached out, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The same gesture from that first night, careful and deliberate. "I'm not trying to hurt you," he said. "I'm trying to make you understand. The man you married is dangerous. Not just to you, to everyone around him. And the only reason he hasn't destroyed you completely is because you're good at surviving." She closed her eyes. "I don't want to talk about this." "Then we won't." His hand dropped. "Go rest. I'll clean up." She nodded, pushed off the wall, and walked on shaking legs toward the guest room. Behind her, she heard Lucien moving through the apartment. The soft thud of cabinet doors, the clink of glass, the hum of the refrigerator opening and closing. Domestic sounds. Normal sounds. As if he hadn't just shattered a man's nose in the hallway. But she didn't come out of her room for the rest of the day. Lucien knocked twice, once at noon, once around dinner. But she didn't answer. Just lay curled on her side in the enormous bed, staring at the wall, trying to make sense of the mess her life had become. 3 days ago, she'd been trapped in a nightmare with no way out. Now she was trapped in a different kind of nightmare. One wrapped in expensive sheets and quiet violence, and a man who looked at her like she was something worth protecting. She didn't know which was worse. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She'd turned it back on out of habit, and now she regretted it. 12 missed calls from Ronan. 7 voicemails. 15 text messages, each one more desperate and vicious than the last. She scrolled through them with numb fingers. "You think you can just leave me?" "I'll find you. You're nothing without me." "Nothing." "Please, baby, come home. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll kill you before I let him have you." The last one made her stomach twist. She set the phone down, face up, and watched the screen light up again and again as more messages came through. Then it stopped. Silence. She waited, heart pounding, but the phone stayed dark. A soft knock on the door made her jump. "Alara?" Lucien's voice, quiet and even. "Can I come in?" She sat up, wiped her face even though she hadn't been crying. "Yeah." The door opened and Lucien stepped inside carrying a tray. Soup, crackers, a glass of water. He set it on the nightstand, then sat on the edge of the bed. Not close enough to crowd her, but close enough that she could feel the weight of him settling the mattress. "You need to eat," he said. "I'm not hungry." "Eat anyway." She reached for the spoon, more to make him stop looking at her like that than because she actually wanted food. The soup was chicken noodle, simple and warm, and after the first few bites, she realized she was starving. She finished the bowl in silence while Lucien watched. When she was done, he took the tray and set it aside. Then he nodded toward her phone. He stopped calling. "I know." "Do you know why?" She shook her head. "Because I had someone pay him a visit." Her pulse spiked. "What does that mean?" "It means he's been reminded of the consequences if he contacts you again." Lucien's voice was calm, almost conversational. "He won't bother you anymore. You can't just—" "I can." He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. And I will, every time, until he understands that you don't belong to him anymore. The words should have made her angry, should have made her stand up and tell him she didn't belong to anyone, that she wasn't some prize to be claimed or protected. But all she felt was tired, so goddamn tired. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. Lucian looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, very quietly, "Nothing you're not ready to give." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." He stood, picked up the tray, and walked to the door, paused with his hand on the frame. "There's a lawyer coming tomorrow," he said without turning around. "She'll help you file for divorce, restraining order too, if you want it." Alara's throat tightened. "I can't afford a lawyer." "You're not paying for it." "Lucian, this isn't up for debate." He glanced back at her, his expression unreadable. "You're getting out, one way or another." Then he left, closing the door softly behind him. The lawyer arrived at 10 the next morning. Her name was Diana Rourke, and she looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Sharp suit, sharper heels, blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun. She set her briefcase on the dining table, pulled out a stack of papers, and got straight to business. "I've reviewed the preliminary information Mr. Darko provided," she said, her voice crisp and efficient. "Based on what I'm seeing, we have more than enough grounds for divorce and a restraining order. The question is how aggressive you want to be." Alara sat across from her, hands folded in her lap, feeling completely out of her depth. "I just want it to be over." "Understandable, but we need to think long-term. Assets, property, potential alimony. There aren't any assets. We don't own anything." Diana glanced at Lucian, who was leaning against the kitchen counter with his arms crossed. He nodded slightly. "All right," Diana said, making a note. "Then we focus on the restraining order. I'll need documentation, photos of injuries, medical records if you have them, witness statements." "I don't have any of that." Diana's pen paused. "None of it?" "I never went to the hospital, and there were no witnesses." "What about friends? Family?" Alara looked down at her hands. "No." The silence stretched. Diana exchanged another glance with Lucian, then closed her notebook and leaned back in her chair. "Okay," she said, her tone softening slightly. "We work with what we have. I'll draft the paperwork based on your testimony. It won't be easy, judges like evidence, but it's not impossible. We'll file by the end of the week." "How long does it take?" "Depends. If he contests it, months. If he doesn't show up to court, we can expedite. Either way, the restraining order can be in place within days." Alara nodded, feeling numb. Diana packed up her briefcase, shook Lucien's hand, then turned to Alara. "I know this feels overwhelming, but you're doing the right thing." Alara didn't respond, didn't know how. After Diana left, Lucien poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed one to Alara. She took it without thinking, downed half in one burning swallow. "You all right?" he asked. "No." "Good." She looked at him sharply. "Good? If you were all right, I'd be worried." He took a slow sip of his drink. "You're allowed to fall apart. Just do it here, where it's safe." Something in her chest cracked. She set the glass down before she dropped it, pressed her palms flat against the table, and tried to breathe through the pressure building behind her ribs. "I don't know how to do this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to be free." Lucien set his glass down beside hers. Then, slowly, he reached across the table and covered her hand with his. His palm was warm, calloused, solid. "One day at a time," he said quietly. "That's all you have to do." She looked up at him, and for the first time since this whole nightmare started, she felt something shift. Not hope, not quite, but something close. 2 days later, Ronan showed up at Marchand's. Alara was in the middle of lunch service, balancing a tray of entrees, when Marcus appeared at her elbow with a tight, anxious expression. "Your husband's here," he hissed. Her blood turned to ice. "What?" "He's in the lobby, asking for you. I told him you weren't available, but he's not leaving." The tray wobbled in her hands. She set it down carefully on the nearest table, ignoring the confused looks from the guests, and followed Marcus to the front. Ronan was standing just inside the entrance, swaying slightly, his face a mess of bruises and cuts. His nose was bent at an unnatural angle, taped across the bridge. His eyes were bloodshot and wild. When he saw her, his face twisted into something ugly. "There she is," he slurred. "My loving wife." Marcus stepped between them. "Sir, you need to leave." "I'm not talking to you." Ronan tried to push past him, but Marcus held firm. "Elara, go to the back," Marcus said quietly, but she couldn't move, couldn't look away from Ronan's eyes, desperate and furious and so familiar. "Baby, please," Ronan said, his voice cracking. "Just talk to me. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." "No." The word came out stronger than she expected. His expression darkened. "You owe me that much." "I don't owe you anything. I'm your husband. Not for long." The words hung in the air. Ronan's face went slack, then twisted with rage. "You filed," he said, his voice dropping to something low and dangerous. "You actually fucking filed." Marcus grabbed his arm. "Sir, I'm calling the police." Ronan shook him off, took a step toward Elara. "You think you can just walk away after everything I've done for you?" "Done for me?" Her voice rose, sharp and brittle. "You've done nothing but destroy me. I gave you a home, a life. And this is how you repay me? By running off with some rich asshole who thinks he can buy you? Get out. Not until you come home." "I'm never coming home." He lunged. Marcus tried to grab him, but Ronan was faster, fueled by desperation and alcohol. He caught Elara's wrist, yanked her toward him, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "Let go of me," she hissed, trying to pull away. "Not until you listen." A hand clamped down on Ronan's shoulder and spun him around. Lucian stood there, his expression calm, his eyes empty. "I warned you," Lucian said quietly. Then he drove his fist into Ronan's solar plexus. Ronan doubled over, gasping, and crumpled to the floor. Lucian didn't stop. He grabbed him by the collar, hauled him upright, and slammed him against the wall hard enough to rattle the framed photos hanging nearby. "You don't listen very well," Lucien said, his voice still quiet, still calm. "So I'm going to make this very simple. If I see you again, I'm going to break every bone in your body, starting with your fingers and working my way up. Do you understand?" Ronan wheezed, nodding frantically. Lucien released him and he collapsed onto the floor, gasping and choking. 2 security guards appeared, summoned by Marcus probably, and hauled Ronan to his feet. He didn't resist, just let them drag him out while he coughed and spat blood onto the polished floor. The lobby went silent. Every guest, every server, every cook who'd come out to see what the commotion was, all of them stared. Elara stood frozen, her wrist throbbing where Ronan had grabbed her, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. Lucien turned to her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head mutely. "Good." He looked at Marcus. "She's done for the day." Marcus nodded quickly. "Of course. Elara, take as much time as you need." Lucien took her arm, gently, carefully, and led her out through the back entrance. His car was waiting in the alley, engine running. He opened the passenger door, waited until she was inside, then closed it and walked around to the driver's side. They drove in silence. Elara stared out the window, watching the city blur past, her mind blank and buzzing at the same time. When they reached the penthouse, Lucien parked and turned off the engine but didn't get out. Just sat there, hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. "I'm sorry," he said finally. She looked at him. "For what?" "For making it worse." "You didn't make it worse. You stopped him. I humiliated him. In public. In front of people who know him." Lucien's jaw tightened. "That's going to make him desperate. And desperate men do stupid things." He was already desperate. "Not like this." He turned to look at her, and there was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before, something that looked almost like fear. "I should have handled it differently." "How?" "I don't know, but not like that." She reached over and placed her hand on his. He flinched slightly, then relaxed. "I'm glad you were there," she said quietly. "I'm glad you hit him. I'm glad he's afraid of you." "Does that make me a bad person?" Lucian's expression softened. "No, it makes you human." They sat in the dim garage, hands linked, neither of them moving. Then Elara's phone buzzed. She pulled it out, looked at the screen, and her stomach dropped. Unknown number. But the message was unmistakable. "You're going to regret this." Lucian leaned over, read it, and his face went hard. "Give me your phone," he said. "What? Why?" "Because he's not going to stop, and I'm not going to let him keep terrorizing you." She handed it over. Lucian scrolled through the messages, his expression darkening with every line. Then he made a call. "It's me," he said when someone answered. "I need a trace on a number, and I need it now." He rattled off the unknown number, listened for a moment, then hung up. "Who was that?" Elara asked. "Someone who owes me a favor." He handed her phone back. "We'll know where he is within the hour." "And then what?" Lucian didn't answer, just got out of the car and walked toward the elevator. She followed, her pulse hammering in her throat. Popped out. 40 minutes later, Lucien's phone rang. He answered, listened, said, "Got it," and hung up. Then he grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Elara asked. "To finish this." "Lucien." He stopped, turned. "Stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone." "You can't just—" "Yes, I can." His voice was flat, final. "This ends tonight." "What are you going to do?" He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, "What I should have done from the beginning," and he walked out. Elara stood in the middle of the penthouse, her heart racing, her hands shaking. She should call someone, the police, a friend, anyone. But she didn't. Because deep down, in the part of herself she hated and couldn't deny, she wanted Lucian to do it. Wanted him to make Ronan disappear. Wanted him to solve the problem she'd never been able to solve herself. And that realization, that dark, vicious truth, made her sink onto the couch and bury her face in her hands. Lucian came back 3 hours later. His knuckles were raw and bloody. His shirt was torn. There was a cut above his left eyebrow that was still bleeding, but his eyes were calm. Elara stood as he walked in, her breath catching. "What did you do?" "What needed to be done." "That's not an answer." He walked past her, went to the sink, and started washing the blood off his hands. "He won't bother you again." "Is he—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "No." Lucian shut off the water, grabbed a towel. "But he understands now. What happens if he comes near you?" "What did you do to him?" He dried his hands slowly, methodically. Then he turned and looked at her with those pale, unreadable eyes. "Do you really want to know?" She opened her mouth, closed it, shook her head. "Good." He tossed the towel onto the counter. "Because some things are better left unsaid." He walked toward his bedroom, then paused in the doorway. "You should get some sleep," he said, without looking back. "Tomorrow, we start moving forward." Then he disappeared into his room and closed the door. Elara stood alone in the vast, silent living room, her heart pounding, her mind racing. She should be horrified, should be packing her things and running as far away from Lucien Darko as she could get. But she wasn't. Because for the first time in 5 years, she felt safe. And that terrified her more than anything else. The next morning, Diana called. "We have a problem," she said, her voice tight. Alara's stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "Your husband didn't show up for the restraining order hearing. The judge issued a warrant, but until he's served, the order isn't enforceable." "What does that mean?" "It means legally, he can still contact you, still come near you, until we can get him in front of a judge." Elara sank onto the couch, the phone pressed to her ear. "How long will that take?" "Could be days, could be weeks. Depends on whether the police can find him." She closed her eyes. "Okay." "Elara." Diana's voice softened. "Are you safe where you are?" "Yes." "Good. Stay there. And if he contacts you, call me immediately." After they hung up, Elara sat in silence, staring at nothing. Lucien emerged from his office a few minutes later, took one look at her face and sat down beside her. "What happened?" She told him. His jaw tightened. "He's hiding." "From who? You?" "From everyone." Lucien leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "He knows what's coming. He's going to try to disappear until the heat dies down." "And if he doesn't?" Lucien looked at her. "Then I find him." "And then what?" His expression went cold. "Then I make sure he never hurts anyone again." The words hung between them, heavy and final. Elara should argue, should tell him that wasn't the answer, But when she opened her mouth, nothing came out. Because she didn't want to argue. She wanted Ronan gone. And if Lucien was willing to do what she couldn't... Okay, she whispered. Lucien's eyes widened slightly. Okay? If you find him... She swallowed hard. Do what you have to do. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he reached over and took her hand, his grip firm and steady. You're not going back, he said quietly. Not ever. I promise you that. She nodded, unable to speak. And for the first time since this nightmare began, she realized there was no going back. Not to Ronan. Not to her old life. Not to the woman she used to be. That woman was gone. And in her place was someone new, someone harder, colder, and more dangerous than she'd ever imagined she could be. Someone who could look a man in the eye and give him permission to destroy another human being. Someone who had finally, irrevocably, crossed the point of no return. 3 days passed like held breath. Alara moved through the penthouse like a ghost, watching the city lights flicker beyond the windows, waiting for something she couldn't name. Lucien came and went, phone calls in low voices, meetings that stretched past midnight, conversations that stopped the moment she entered a room. He was hunting Ronan. She knew that much. What she didn't know was whether he'd found him yet. She didn't ask. On the 4th morning, she woke to voices in the living room. Male voices, unfamiliar and rough. She pulled on a robe and crept to her door, pressing her ear against the wood. Last confirmed sighting was 2 days ago, someone was saying. Motel off Highway 9, paid cash, used a fake name. And now? Lucien's voice, cold and flat. Gone. Left his car in the parking lot. No trail after that. Silence. Then Lucien said something too quiet for her to hear. The other voice responded, equally low, and she caught only fragments. Checking bus stations, border crossings. 48 hours, maybe less. Footsteps approached her door. She stumbled back just as it opened. Lucien stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Behind him, 2 men in dark suits were gathering papers off the dining table. Surveillance photos, maps, documents she couldn't read from this distance. Get dressed, Lucien said quietly. We need to talk. Her pulse spiked. What happened? Not here. Get dressed. 20 minutes later, they were in his car, driving through morning traffic toward the industrial district. Alara sat in the passenger seat, hands folded tight in her lap, watching warehouses and shipping yards slide past the window. Where are we going? She asked. Somewhere private. Lucien, not yet. His hands tightened on the wheel. Wait. They pulled into an abandoned lot, gravel crunching under the tires. Lucien parked behind a rusted shipping container and killed the engine. For a long moment, he just sat there, staring through the windshield at nothing. Then he said, Ronan's gone. Her stomach dropped. What do you mean, gone? I mean, he ran, left the city, probably left the state. You're sure? I have people looking, good people. They can't find him. Lucien's jaw tightened. He's either very lucky or very smart. Maybe both. Alara's hand started shaking. So what now? Now you're free. He turned to look at her. The restraining order goes through whether he shows up or not. The divorce gets finalized in absentia. You never have to see him again. It should have felt like relief, like victory. But all she felt was a cold, creeping dread. You don't believe that, she said quietly. Lucien's expression darkened. No, I don't. Why not? Because men like Ronan don't just disappear. They wait. They plan. And when you finally let your guard down, they come back. She closed her eyes, leaning her head back against the seat. So I'm never safe. Not until he's dead. The words hung in the air between them, blunt and brutal and undeniably true. I can't live like this, she whispered, looking over my shoulder forever. You won't have to. Lucien reached over and took her hand. I'll find him. And when I do, this ends. She looked at their joined hands, his scarred and calloused, hers small and pale. And if you don't find him, I will. But she heard the uncertainty beneath the confidence, heard the edge of frustration he was trying to hide. Lucien Darko, powerful, connected, seemingly untouchable, couldn't find one desperate alcoholic. And that terrified her more than anything. What's up? They drove back in silence. When they reached the penthouse, Alara went straight to her room and closed the door. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone, scrolling through the dozens of blocked numbers and deleted messages. Evidence of Ronan's obsession, his rage, his need to control her even from a distance. But for 3 days now, nothing. Radio silence. It felt wrong, like the air before a storm. She was about to set the phone down when it buzzed in her hand. Unknown number. Her breath caught. She almost didn't answer, almost let it go to voicemail, but something made her swipe to accept. Hello? Static. Heavy breathing. Then, Alara. Her blood turned to ice. Not Ronan's voice. A woman's voice. Older, rough from years of cigarettes and hard living. Who is this? Alara managed. Someone who knows what you did. I don't understand. Ronan told me everything. About you, about the man you're living with, about how you destroyed my son's life. The room tilted. Alara gripped the edge of the bed to steady herself. Your son? My boy never hurt anyone until you came along. He was good. He was kind. And you broke him. That's not... He's the one who... Don't you dare lie to me. The voice turned sharp, vicious. I know what you are. I know what you did. And I know you're going to pay for it. The line went dead. Alara sat frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear, her heart hammering so hard she thought her ribs might crack. Ronan's mother. She'd never met the woman, never even known she existed. Ronan had told her his parents were dead, car accident when he was 16. She'd believed him because why wouldn't she? But he'd lied. About that. About everything. She stumbled out of her room, phone clutched in her shaking hand, and found Lucian in his office. He looked up from his laptop, saw her face, and was on his feet immediately. What happened? She handed him the phone. Listen to the voicemail. He played it back, his expression growing darker with every word. When it finished, he set the phone down carefully and pulled out his own. I need a trace on this number, he said when someone answered. And I need background on... He looked at Alara. What's Ronan's mother's name? I don't know. He told me she was dead. Lucian's jaw tightened. Find out who called this number in the last 5 minutes. Full background. I want it in an hour. He hung up and turned to Alara. Did she threaten you directly? She said I was going to pay. That's not specific enough to... He stopped, reading something in her expression. What else? She said Ronan told her everything, which means he's in contact with her, which means you can find him through her. A slow, cold smile spread across Lucian's face. Smart girl. 45 minutes later, his phone rang. He answered, listened, made notes on a pad of paper. When he hung up, he looked at Alara with an expression she couldn't quite read. Her name is Catherine Hale, lives in a trailer park about 60 miles outside the city, has a record, fraud, assault, possession. Ronan grew up in the foster system after she lost custody when he was 9. He reconnected with her about 5 years ago. 5 years. Right around the time he'd married Alara. He's been talking to her this whole time, she said quietly. More than that. Lucian's expression darkened. Bank records show he's been sending her money. A lot of money. More than he should have had. Alara's stomach twisted. Where was he getting it? That's what I'm going to find out. He grabbed his jacket. Stay here. Lock the doors. Don't answer the phone unless it's me. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. She called me, threatened me. I have a right to... Alara. He stepped close, gripping her shoulders. This woman is dangerous. And if Ronan's with her, this could get ugly fast. I need you safe. Please. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she wasn't some fragile thing that needed protecting, but when she looked into his eyes, she saw something that made her breath catch. Fear. Real, genuine fear. Not for himself, for her. Okay, she whispered. He kissed her forehead, quick and chaste, then left. The apartment felt enormous and empty without him. Alara locked the door, checked it twice, then paced the living room like a caged animal. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow seemed threatening. She tried to distract herself, turned on the TV, made coffee, scrolled through her phone, but nothing worked. Finally, she went to Lucian's office. She knew she shouldn't, knew it was a violation of trust, but she needed to understand. Needed to know who Lucien Darko really was and why he cared so much about a broken waitress with a violent husband. The office was immaculate. Dark wood desk, leather chair, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. His laptop sat closed on the desk. She opened it, expecting a password screen. It was unlocked. Her pulse spiked. This was a test. Had to be. No one left their computer unlocked, especially not someone like Lucienne. She should close it, walk away, pretend she'd never been here. Instead, she clicked on the file browser. Dozens of folders, most labeled with names she didn't recognize. She scrolled through them randomly, opening a few, finding contracts and financial documents and surveillance photos of people she'd never seen. Then she saw a folder labeled Hail. Her hand trembled as she clicked it. Inside were dozens of files. Photos of Ronan, some recent, some from years ago, bank statements, police reports, medical records, and photos of her. Alara's breath stopped. There were hundreds of them, her leaving for work, her walking to the restaurant, her sitting alone on a park bench during her break. Some were dated from weeks ago, others from months ago, some from before she'd ever met Lucien. Her vision blurred. She scrolled faster, clicking through file after file, her hands shaking so badly she could barely control the mouse. A document labeled Surveillance Log. She opened it. Pages and pages of notes, times, locations, descriptions of her daily routine down to the minute. Subject leaves apartment at 5:47 a.m. Takes usual route to Marchand's. No deviation. Appears fatigued. Visible bruising on left cheek. Subject finishes shift at 11:32 p.m. Stands in alley for approximately 8 minutes. Smokes half a cigarette. Returns inside. Subject observed argument with husband through apartment window. Husband strikes subject twice. Subject does not fight back. The entries went back 6 months. 6 months before Lucien had ever walked into Marchand's. 6 months before he'd sat at table 12 and asked who hurt her. He'd known. He'd known everything. And he'd been watching her. The office door opened. Alara spun around, her heart in her throat. Lucien stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You're back early," she said, her voice barely a whisper. He looked at the laptop screen, then at her. "I see you found my files. You've been watching me for months, before we even met." "Yes." Just that. No explanation, no apology. "Why?" The word came out broken. He stepped into the office, closed the door behind him. "Because I needed to understand the situation before I intervened." "Intervened?" Her voice rose. "You make it sound like some kind of business transaction." It was. The bluntness of it hit her like a fist. "What?" Lucien moved to the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the city. 3 years ago, a friend of mine, someone I trusted, told me about a woman he knew. A good woman trapped in a bad situation. He asked me to help her. I said no. I had my own problems, my own business to run. He paused, his jaw tightening. 2 weeks later, her husband beat her to death in their kitchen. She was 26 years old, and I could have stopped it. Alara's breath caught. "After that," Lucien continued, his voice flat, "I started paying attention, looking for situations like hers, like yours. I have resources most people don't, connections, money, influence. So I use them. To spy on people? To identify people who need help." He turned to face her. "I've done this 17 times, Alara. 17 women in 3 years. I watch. I gather evidence, and when the time is right, I step in." Her mind reeled. "So this, everything you've done, it was just charity?" "No." His voice hardened. "It was justice." "Justice?" She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You stalked me. You manipulated me. You made me think." Her voice cracked. "You made me think you cared. I do care. Don't." She held up a hand, backing toward the door. "Don't you dare stand there and tell me you care when you've been treating me like some kind of project. That's not what this is." "Then what is it, Lucien? What am I to you?" He crossed the room in 3 long strides and gripped her shoulders, his eyes blazing. "You're the only one who matters." She stared at him, speechless. "The other 16, he said quietly, I helped them and walked away. Set them up with new identities, new lives, and never looked back. But you, His grip tightened. I can't walk away from you. Why not? Because I love you. The words hung in the air, raw and impossible. Elara jerked back out of his grip. No, you don't get to say that. Not when. I know how it looks. I know what I've done, but everything, all of it, was to keep you safe. By lying to me? By protecting you. I didn't ask for your protection. You didn't have to. His voice dropped. The first time I saw you, you were sitting in that alley behind Marchand's. It was 3 a.m. and you were crying so hard you couldn't breathe. And I knew if I didn't do something, you were going to end up like Sarah. Who's Sarah? The woman I didn't save. Tears burned behind Elara's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I'm not her. I know. And I'm not yours to save. I know that too. He stepped back, his expression crumbling. But I can't. He ran a hand through his hair, the careful control finally shattering. I watched 17 women walk away and start new lives, and every single time I told myself it was enough, that I'd done my part. But then I saw you and I knew I'd never be able to let you go. Elara's chest ached. She wanted to scream, wanted to hit him, wanted to run. But beneath the rage and betrayal there was something else, something that terrified her. Because part of her, the broken, desperate part she hated, understood. I need to leave, she said quietly. Lucien's face went pale. Elara, I need to think. I need space. Her voice broke. I can't be here right now. Where will you go? I don't know. A hotel, a friend's place, anywhere that isn't here. She pushed past him, grabbed her bag from the guest room, and headed for the door. Lucien followed. Elara, please, don't do this. She stopped with her hand on the doorknob, didn't turn around. Did you find Ronan? Silence. Lucien, did you find him? No. His voice was hollow. Catherine wasn't home. Neighbors said they haven't seen her in days. She's gone too. Elara closed her eyes. So they're together. Probably. And they're planning something. I don't know. She turned to look at him. He looked wrecked, hair disheveled, eyes red-rimmed, the careful mask he always wore completely shattered. You said you loved me, she said quietly. I do. Then let me go. Something in his expression broke. Okay. She opened the door. But Elara. His voice stopped her. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. She walked out without responding. The hotel was cheap and anonymous, the kind of place where no one asked questions and cash was preferred. Elara checked in under a fake name, locked herself in a room that smelled like stale smoke and disinfectant, and finally let herself fall apart. She cried until her throat was raw and her eyes were swollen shut. Cried for the life she'd lost, the lies she'd believed, the trust that had been shattered. Cried for the woman she used to be and the woman she was becoming. When there were no tears left, she lay on the scratchy comforter and stared at the water-stained ceiling. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her stomach twisted, but she answered anyway. What? You left him. Catherine Hale's voice, sharp with satisfaction. Good. That's real good. Where's Ronan? Safe. Where you can't hurt him anymore. I never hurt him. He hurt me. Catherine laughed, a harsh, grating sound. You're all the same, all you women. Twist everything around, play the victim, destroy good men. He's not a good man. He's my man, my son, and you tried to take him from me. Elara sat up, her pulse racing. What do you want? I want you to understand something. Catherine's voice dropped, cold and venomous. You think you're free now, think you can start over, but you're not. You're never going to be free. Because Ronan and I, we're family, and family doesn't quit. Are you threatening me? I'm promising you, one way or another, you're going to pay for what you did. The line went dead. Elara sat frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear. Then she called Lucien. He answered on the first ring. Elara? She called me again, Catherine. She said... Her voice shook. She said they're coming for me. Where are you? The Sunrise Motel, Highway 9. Stay there. Lock the door. I'm on my way. Lucien, I'm coming. Don't argue. He hung up. Alara locked the door, shoved a chair under the handle, and sat on the bed with her knees pulled to her chest. 15 minutes passed, then footsteps in the hallway. A knock on the door. Alara, it's me. She recognized his voice, pulled the chair away, unlocked the door. Lucien stepped inside, closing and locking it behind him. He looked her over quickly, checking for injuries, then pulled her into his arms. She went stiff for a moment, then collapsed against him, shaking. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. You have nothing to be sorry for. I left. I shouldn't have left. You had every right. He pulled back, cupping her face in his hands. I lied to you. I manipulated you. You were right to leave. But you were trying to help. That doesn't make it okay. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. I don't know what to do. I don't know who to trust anymore. You don't have to trust me, but you do have to let me keep you safe. She opened her eyes. What if you can't? His expression hardened. Then I'll die trying. A crash from outside made them both jump. Lucien moved to the window, peering through the gap in the curtains. His entire body went rigid. Get in the bathroom, he said quietly. What? Why? Now, Alara. She didn't argue, just grabbed her phone and ran into the tiny bathroom, locking the door behind her. Through the thin walls, she heard voices. No, she's in there. Finish this. Then Lucien, cold and calm. You're not getting near her. She's my son's wife. Not anymore. I'll kill you. I swear to God, I'll... The sound of gunfire shattered the night. Alara screamed, pressing herself against the far wall. More shots, breaking glass, shouting, then silence. She waited, heart hammering, too terrified to move. A knock on the bathroom door. Alara! Lucien's voice, rough and strained. It's over. You can come out. She unlocked the door with shaking hands. Lucien stood in the destroyed hotel room, blood running down his left arm. Behind him, through the shattered window, she could see flashing blue and red lights. You're hurt, she whispered. It's nothing. He swayed slightly. Just a graze. Where's Catherine? Dead. The word hit her like a slap. You killed her? She had a gun. She was going to shoot you. His eyes were empty, hollow. I didn't have a choice. Sirens wailed closer. Lucien looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. This is where it ends, Alara. The police are coming. They're going to ask questions, and you're going to have to decide. Decide what? Whether you tell them the truth. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. About me. About what I've done. About all of it. Lucien, if you do, I go to prison, probably for the rest of my life. But you'll be free, really free. No more lies, no more manipulation. And if I don't? His jaw tightened. Then we figure out how to survive this. Together. The sirens were right outside now. Doors slamming. Shouted commands. Police! Open the door! Lucien held her gaze. What's it going to be? And Alara realized, with a clarity that was almost painful, that this was the moment. The real point of no return. Not when she'd left Ronan. Not when she'd moved into Lucien's penthouse. But right here. Right now. When she had to choose between the truth and survival. Between justice and love. Between who she used to be and who she was becoming. The door burst open. Officers flooded in, guns drawn. And Alara opened her mouth and made her choice. He saved my life. The words came out steady, clear, cutting through the chaos of shouted commands and clicking safeties. Every officer in the room turned to look at Alara. She stood with her back against the bathroom door frame, her hands visible and empty, her face pale but resolute. That woman came here to kill me, she continued, her voice growing stronger. She had a gun. She fired first. He protected me. The lead officer, a stocky man with gray at his temples and tired eyes, lowered his weapon slightly. Ma'am, I need you to step outside. Not without him. Ma'am, he's bleeding. He needs a hospital, and I'm not leaving him. Lucien stood perfectly still, his injured arm hanging at his side, blood dripping steadily onto the stained carpet. He didn't look at Alara, didn't speak. Just watched the officers with that same cold, empty expression she'd seen 100 times before. The lead officer gestured to two of his men. Check the perimeter. Find the weapon. They moved past Lucian toward the shattered window. One of them crouched beside Catherine's body, sprawled on the gravel outside, a dark pool spreading beneath her torso. The other swept his flashlight across the parking lot. Got it, he called. Revolver, 38. Looks like it's been fired. The lead officer's expression shifted slightly, still cautious, but less aggressive. Sir, I need you to come with us, get that arm looked at, and answer some questions. Lucian nodded once. And you, ma'am. The officer looked at Alara. You'll need to come down to the station. Give a formal statement. Okay. They were separated immediately. Alara was ushered into one patrol car, Lucien into an ambulance. She watched through the rear window as paramedics cut away his sleeve, revealing a deep gash that ran from his shoulder to his elbow. He didn't flinch, didn't make a sound, just stared straight ahead while they worked. The patrol car pulled away, and he disappeared from view. The police station smelled like burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. Alara sat in an interview room, gray walls, metal table, fluorescent lights that buzzed and flickered, and told the same story 3 different times to 3 different detectives. Yes, she knew Catherine Hale. No, she'd never met her in person before tonight. Yes, Catherine had called her twice, made threats, said she was coming for her. Yes, Lucian had come to protect her. No, she didn't see exactly what happened. She was in the bathroom, but she heard the shots. The detectives took notes, asked follow-up questions, circled back to details she'd already covered, but nothing in her story changed because it was the truth. Mostly. She left out the part about Lucien's surveillance, the files, the other women, the months of watching her before they'd ever met. Those weren't relevant to tonight. Those were buried secrets that would only complicate everything. After 4 hours, they finally let her go. We'll be in touch if we have more questions, the lead detective said, handing her a business card. Don't leave town. She nodded, pocketed the card, and walked out into the pre-dawn cold. A black sedan was waiting at the curb. The back door opened and Lucien leaned out. His left arm was wrapped in white bandages from shoulder to wrist, held in a sling against his chest. His face was drawn, pale, beneath the streetlights, but his eyes were sharp. Get in, he said. She slid into the back seat, and the car pulled away before she'd even closed the door. They sat in silence for several blocks. Then Lucien said, very quietly, Thank you. For what? For not telling them. She looked at her hands folded tight in her lap. I told them the truth. Not all of it. No, not all of it. He reached over with his good hand and covered both of hers. His palm was warm, steady, real. Why? He asked. She turned to look at him. Because you were right. About everything. About Ronan. About me needing help. About... Her voice caught. About me not being able to do this alone. You could have walked away. Started over. Been free of all of this. I don't want to be free of you. The words hung between them, raw and honest and terrifying. Lucien's grip tightened. Catherine's dead, but Ronan's still out there. I know. He's going to come for you, especially now. He'll blame you for his mother's death. Let him come. Lucien studied her face. You mean that? It wasn't a question. I'm done running, Alara said. I'm done hiding. I'm done being afraid of him. What are you going to do? She met his eyes. Whatever it takes. Buyouts. The sun was rising by the time they reached the penthouse. Gold and pink light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting the city in soft colors that felt wrong after the violence of the night. Lucien collapsed onto the couch, his face tight with pain. Alara grabbed the pill bottle the hospital had given him, shook out 2 tablets, and brought them with a glass of water. Take these. He swallowed them dry, waved away the water. I need to make some calls. You need to rest. Ronan can wait 2 hours. She knelt in front of him, her hands on his knees. Please, just rest. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. She helped him to his bedroom, the first time she'd been inside. It was sparse, almost monastic. Dark walls, a massive bed with charcoal sheets, a single nightstand with a lamp and a gun. He saw her looking at the weapon. Old habit, he said. From what? Another life. He sat heavily on the edge of the bed. before I became this. She wanted to ask more, wanted to understand who he'd been before he started saving broken women, but exhaustion was pulling at both of them like a riptide. "Lie down," she said. He did, awkwardly maneuvering around his injured arm. She pulled off his shoes, covered him with a blanket, and turned to leave. "Stay." She stopped. "What?" "Stay with me. Please." Her heart hammered. "Lucien, I'm not asking for anything. His voice cracked. "I don't want to be alone right now." She looked at him, this dangerous, broken man who'd killed for her, bled for her, risked everything for her, and made a choice. She lay down beside him, careful not to jostle his arm. He shifted, pulling her close with his good hand, tucking her head beneath his chin. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair. "For all of it. I know. If I could go back, you can't. Neither can I." She pressed her palm flat against his chest, feeling his heartbeat through the thin fabric of his shirt. "We just move forward." His arm tightened around her. Together? Together. They fell asleep like that, tangled in each other as the city woke up around them. Elara woke to voices. She sat up carefully, trying not to disturb Lucien, but he was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed with his phone pressed to his ear. "Don't care what it costs, I want him found." A pause. "No, not alive. I'm done playing games." He hung up, noticed Elara watching, and his expression softened slightly. "How long was I out?" she asked. 3 hours? Maybe 4. "You should still be sleeping." "Can't." He stood, rolling his shoulder experimentally and wincing. "I've got people working every contact, every lead. Ronan can't hide forever." "And when you find him?" His jaw tightened. "I told you, this ends." She stood, crossed to him, placed her hand over his heart. "I don't want you to be a murderer for me. I already am." Catherine was self-defense. "Maybe, but Ronan won't be." He covered her hand with his. "I'm going to hunt him down and I'm going to kill him, and I need you to be okay with that." She should say no, should tell him there had to be another way. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, "Make it quick." Something dark flickered in his eyes. Quick isn't what he deserves. "I don't care what he deserves. I care about you, about what this will do to you." She gripped his shirt. "Promise me, quick and clean. Then we walk away." He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. Quick and clean. His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his entire body went rigid. "What?" Elara asked. "They found him." Her pulse spiked. "Where?" "Warehouse district, same place we talked before." He was already moving, grabbing a jacket from the closet, checking the gun from his nightstand. He's alone. No backup, no weapons that they can see. It's a trap. Probably. Then don't go. He looked at her. "If I don't end this now, it never ends. You know that." She did, but that didn't make it easier. "I'm coming with you," she said. "Absolutely not. He's my husband, my problem. I should be there." "Elara, you don't get to protect me from this." Her voice turned hard. "Not anymore." They stared at each other. Then Lucien's expression shifted, something like respect, or maybe resignation. "Fine, but you stay in the car. No arguments." "No arguments," she agreed. 15 minutes later, they were driving through midday traffic toward the industrial district. The same route they'd taken days ago. The same abandoned lot. The same rusted shipping container. But this time, Ronan's car was parked in plain view. Lucien stopped 50 yards away, killed the engine. "Wait here." "Lucien." "You promised." He got out before she could respond, moving toward the warehouse with his gun drawn. His injured arm was still in the sling, but he moved like it didn't slow him down at all. Elara watched through the windshield, her heart in her throat. Lucien disappeared around the corner of the building. Seconds stretched into minutes. Then a gunshot cracked through the air. Alara's breath stopped. Another shot. Then another. She grabbed the door handle, stopped. She'd promised to stay. But that was before gunfire. Before the possibility that Lucien might be lying dead in that warehouse right now. She got out of the car and ran. The warehouse was dark inside, lit only by shafts of dusty sunlight streaming through holes in the roof. Alara slipped through a side door, pressing herself against the wall, trying to see through the gloom. Voices echoed from somewhere deeper in the building. "Should have stayed away from her," Ronan's voice, slurred and shaking. "Had your chance to disappear." Lucien, cold and steady. Alara crept forward, following the voices, her pulse hammering so hard she could barely hear over it. She rounded a corner and froze. They were in the center of the warehouse floor, a wide, empty space littered with debris and broken pallets. Lucien stood with his gun aimed at Ronan's chest. Ronan was on his knees, swaying, his face a mask of bruises and dried blood. He had a gun too, but it was lying on the ground several feet away. "You took everything from me," Ronan said, his voice breaking. "My wife, my mother, my life. You did that yourself. I loved her. You beat her. I was trying to make her better, trying to fix her." Ronan's eyes were wild, desperate. "She was broken when I found her. I gave her a home, a purpose. You gave her hell. She needed me. She needed to be free of you." Lucien's finger tightened on the trigger. "And now she will be." "Wait." The word came from Alara. Both men turned. She stepped out of the shadows, her hands empty and visible, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her ribs. "Alara," Lucien's voice was sharp. "Get out of here." "No, Alara, I need to say something." She looked at Ronan, really looked at him, saw the man she'd married, charming and attentive and full of promises, saw the monster he'd become, cruel and violent and unforgiving, and saw beneath it all something small and pathetic and broken. "I loved you," she said quietly. "When we met, when you asked me to marry you, I really did love you." Ronan's face crumpled. "Baby." "Don't." Her voice turned hard. "Don't call me that. Don't call me anything. You don't have that right anymore." "Please, I can change. I swear I can." "You can't. And even if you could, I wouldn't want you to, because I finally understand something." "What?" She took a step closer. "You were never trying to fix me. You were trying to break me. Because broken things are easier to control. That's not..." And it worked. For years it worked. But not anymore. She looked him dead in the eyes. "I'm not broken. I'm not yours. And I'm not afraid of you." Ronan's face twisted with rage. He lunged for the gun on the ground. Lucien fired. The shot echoed through the warehouse like thunder. Ronan jerked, clutched his shoulder, and fell sideways onto the concrete. Alara didn't scream, didn't move, just watched as Lucien crossed to Ronan and kicked the gun away. Ronan was gasping, blood pumping between his fingers. "You shot me. You actually..." "Shoulder," Lucien said calmly. "You'll live. Unfortunately." He pulled out his phone, dialed. "I need an ambulance and police at the old Riverside warehouse. Gunshot wound. Suspect is restrained." He hung up and looked at Alara. "You okay?" She nodded mutely. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Lucien crouched beside Ronan. "Listen very carefully. When the police get here, you're going to tell them you came here to kill Alara. That you fired first. That I shot you in self-defense. Do you understand?" Ronan's eyes were glazing with shock, but he managed a nod. "Good. Because if you don't, if you say anything else, I will make sure you spend the rest of your life in a cell. And not a nice one. The kind where men like you don't last long." "I understand," Ronan wheezed. The sirens were right outside now. Lucien stood, moved to Alara's side. "You need to get out of here, right now, through the back." "What about you?" "I'll handle this, but you can't be here. Can't be part of this." "Lucien, go." He gripped her shoulders. "Please, trust me." She looked into his eyes and saw the same thing she'd seen that first night at Marchand's. Absolute certainty. So she nodded, turned, ran toward the back entrance. Behind her, she heard doors slamming open, shouted commands, Lucien's calm voice explaining the situation. She burst out into the daylight and kept running. She made it 3 blocks before her legs gave out. She collapsed against a chain-link fence, gasping, her vision swimming. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with shaking hands. Text from Lucian. It's done. He confessed. They're taking him to the hospital, then booking him. Multiple charges. He won't make bail. Another text immediately after. Where are you? She sent him her location. 10 minutes later, a car pulled up. Not Lucian's sedan. A different one, dark blue, unmarked. The passenger window rolled down. Diana Rourke sat in the driver's seat. Get in, the lawyer said. Alara climbed into the passenger seat. Diana pulled back into traffic without a word. Lucien called me, Diana said after a minute. Told me to pick you up. Take you somewhere safe. Where's safe? My place. Guest room. No one knows about it. For how long? As long as it takes. Alara leaned her head back against the seat. It's really over? The immediate threat? Yes. Ronan's going away for a long time. Assault. Attempted murder. Parole violation from a previous arrest Lucian's people dug up. Diana glanced at her. You're free. Free. The word should have brought relief, joy, something. Instead, all Alara felt was empty. What about Lucien? She asked. He'll be at the station for a few more hours, giving statements. But he's in the clear. Self-defense is pretty straightforward when the other guy shoots first. Ronan didn't shoot first. Diana's expression didn't change. According to the ballistics evidence, he did. According to Lucien's testimony, he did. And according to Ronan's confession, he did. Alara closed her eyes. Right. You don't need to know the details, Diana said quietly. You just need to move forward. They drove in silence for a while. Then Diana said, He really loves you, you know. Who? Lucien. I've worked with him for 3 years, helped him with situations like yours more times than I can count, and I've never seen him like this. Like what? Terrified. Diana pulled into an underground garage beneath a sleek apartment building. He called me 4 times in 2 hours, kept asking if you were okay, if you were safe, if you needed anything. She parked, turned off the engine. That's not the Lucien I know. The Lucien I know is cold, calculated, doesn't get attached. Maybe he's changing. Maybe. Diana opened her door. Or maybe you changed him. Diana's apartment was the opposite of Lucien's. Warm colors, soft furniture, photos on the walls. It felt lived in. Real. Guest rooms down the hall, Diana said. Bathrooms attached. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen. Thank you. Diana nodded, already pulling out her phone to make calls. Alara found the guest room and locked herself inside. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. Catherine was dead. Ronan was arrested. Lucien had killed for her. Again. And she'd let him. More than that. She'd wanted him to. Her phone buzzed. Text from Lucien. You safe? Yes. Good. I'll come get you tonight. Okay. A pause. Then, I love you. Her hands trembled as she typed back, I know. She set the phone down and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere in the city, Ronan was being processed, fingerprinted, photographed, locked in a cell where he couldn't hurt her anymore. Somewhere else, Lucien was finishing paperwork, telling his version of events, making sure every detail aligned. And here she was, caught between 2 worlds. The old one, where she was a victim, a survivor, someone who needed saving. And the new one, where she was something else entirely, something harder, something dangerous, something that could look a man in the eyes and tell him he deserved to die. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Heavy breathing, then a voice she didn't recognize, male, rough, with an accent she couldn't place. Alara Vance? Who is this? Someone who knew Catherine, someone who wants to talk about what happened to her. Her blood ran cold. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. The voice turned sharp. And you're going to pay for it, just like she said. The line went dead. Alara sat frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear. Then she called Lucien. He answered immediately. What's wrong? Someone just called. A man. He knew about Catherine. He said... Her voice shook. He said I'm going to pay. Silence on the other end. Then, Did he say anything else? Give a name? No, just that he knew her, that he wants to talk about what happened. Fuck. She heard movement, doors closing, an engine starting. Diana still with you? Yes. Put her on. Alara went to the living room, handed Diana the phone. Diana listened, her expression growing darker. Then she said, "Understood," and hung up. She looked at Alara. "Pack your things. We're leaving." "Where are we going?" "Lucian has a safe house outside the city. We're going there. Now." "Diana, what's—" Catherine had friends, people she knew from prison, people who won't take kindly to her being dead. Diana was already moving, grabbing a go-bag from her closet. "Lucien's on his way. We're meeting him at the safe house." Alara's chest tightened. "This isn't over, is it?" Diana looked at her with something like pity. "No, it's not." They were out the door in under 5 minutes. The safe house was an hour outside the city, a cabin in the woods, isolated and invisible from the road. Diana parked behind the building and they went inside. It was sparse, functional. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a living room with boarded windows. "Stay away from the windows," Diana said. "Don't turn on any lights, and don't answer the door for anyone except Lucian." "What about you?" "I have to get back to the city, handle some things." Diana squeezed her shoulder. "You'll be okay. Lucien will be here soon." Then she left, and Alara was alone. She sat in the darkened living room, listening to the sounds of the forest outside. Wind in the trees, distant animal calls, the creak of old wood settling, and beneath it all, the hammer of her pulse in her ears. An hour passed, then another. Her phone buzzed. Text from Lucy. "Yen." 10 minutes out, she exhaled, stood, paced. Headlights swept across the boarded windows. She went to the door, looked through the peephole. Lucien's car. She unlocked the deadbolt, pulled the door open. Lucien stood on the porch, his face drawn and exhausted. His injured arm was still in the sling. "You okay?" he asked. "No." He stepped inside, closed and locked the door behind him. Then he pulled her into his arms, awkward because of the sling, but solid and real and safe. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I thought it was over. I thought—" "It's not your fault." "It is. I should have known Catherine had people, should have anticipated—" "Stop." She pulled back, looked up at him. "We're alive. We're together. That's what matters." He cupped her face in his good hand. "I'm going to find whoever called you, and I'm going to end them." "No." His eyes widened. "What?" "No more killing, no more violence." Her voice was steady, final. "We disappear. Change our names. Start over somewhere far away together." "Alara Sad, I mean it, Lucien. This ends now, or I walk." He stared at her for a long moment. Then his expression crumbled. "I don't know how to stop." "Then learn." She pressed her palm against his chest. "For me. Please." His hand covered hers. "What if they find us? Then we run again, and again, and again, until they give up or we're too far away to matter. That's not a life." "It's better than the alternative." He closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against hers. "You're asking me to be someone I'm not. I'm asking you to be someone you could be." She rose on her toes, pressed her lips to his, soft and brief and full of everything she couldn't say. "Choose me. Choose us. Choose a future that isn't soaked in blood." When she pulled back, his eyes were wet. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." They stood in the darkness, holding each other, while outside the wind howled through the trees, and somewhere in the city, enemies they didn't know plotted revenge they couldn't predict. But for now, for this one fragile moment, they were alive. They were together. And they were choosing something neither of them had ever thought possible. Hope. They stayed in the cabin for 3 days. 3 days of listening to every sound, every branch snapping, every car passing on the distant road. 3 days of Lucian pacing like a caged animal, checking the windows, his phone, the perimeter. 3 days of Alara trying to convince herself that running was the right choice. On the 4th morning, his phone rang. He answered, listened, his face going hard. "When?" A pause. "How many?" Another pause. "Understood." He hung up and looked at Alara with an expression that made her stomach drop. They found us, he said quietly. Who? Catherine's people. 3 of them, ex-cons she did time with. They're asking around the city, showing your photo, offering money for information. Alara's hands started shaking. How long do we have? A day, maybe less. He ran his good hand through his hair. Diana's trying to buy us time, but it's not enough. No. She stood, walked to the boarded window, pressed her palm against the rough wood. Outside, morning light filtered through the trees, turning everything gold and green and deceptively peaceful. I'm tired of running, she said. Alara? I mean it. She turned to face him. We can run forever and they'll keep coming, or we can end this. His jaw tightened. You said no more killing. I said no more killing for revenge. This is different. How? Because they're coming for us. For me. And I'm not going to spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. She crossed to him, placed her hands on his chest. You taught me how to survive. Now teach me how to fight. He stared at her. You don't know what you're asking. Yes, I do. If we do this, if we go on the offensive, there's no going back. Not to the life you wanted, not to starting over clean. There never was going to be a clean start. Not really. Her voice steadied. So we finish it, together. And then we decide what comes after. Lucien searched her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. Okay, so they spent the rest of the day planning. Lucien made calls to people Alara didn't know, using names that meant nothing to her. He spoke in shorthand, in code, in clipped sentences that revealed nothing to anyone listening but said everything to those who understood. By evening, he had what he needed. They're staying at a motel on the east side, he said, spreading a hand-drawn map across the kitchen table. 3 men, Marcus Cole, Vincent Hayes, and someone who goes by Reaper, real name unknown. All 3 have records: assault, armed robbery, 1 suspected murder that never stuck. What's their plan? Find you, kill you, make it look like an accident. He pointed to a circled section on the map. They're using the motel as a base, rotating shifts, 1 always on watch. So we can't just walk in. No, we draw them out. How? He looked at her. You call them. Her breath caught. What? You call the number that contacted you. Tell them you want to meet, to talk, that you're willing to pay for them to leave you alone. They'll know it's a trap. Probably, but greed makes men stupid, and these 3 aren't exactly criminal masterminds. He tapped the map. We pick the location. Somewhere public enough they feel safe. Isolated enough we have control. And then? His expression went cold. Then I make sure they can't hurt anyone ever again. She should have been horrified, should have argued, but all she felt was a grim, settled certainty. When? She asked. Tomorrow night, back. The next day crawled by. Alara cleaned her gun, the small 9mm Lucien had given her that morning, along with a quick lesson on how to use it. She'd never held a weapon before, never imagined she would, but the weight of it in her hand felt right, felt necessary. Lucien watched her from the doorway. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. I can handle them alone. 3 against 1, with your arm still healing. She looked up at him. I'm not letting you go alone. I've done worse odds. And gotten shot, stabbed, nearly killed. How many times? She set the gun down carefully. This ends tomorrow, for both of us. Or it doesn't end at all. He crossed the room, knelt in front of her, took her hands in his. I need you to promise me something. What? If it goes wrong, if something happens to me, you run. You don't look back, you don't try to help, you just run, and you keep running. Lucien, promise me. She looked into his pale eyes and saw the fear there, not for himself, for her. I promise, she whispered. He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. I love you. Whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to know that. I know. She held him tight. I love you too. They stayed like that until the light outside faded to black. The meeting place was an abandoned parking garage downtown. 4 levels, multiple exits. Security cameras long dead. Perfect for an ambush. Perfect for a last stand. They arrived an hour early. Lucien positioned himself on the third level, tucked behind a concrete pillar with a clear sightline to the entrance. Alara waited in the car on the ground floor, engine running, phone in hand. At exactly 9 p.m., she made the call. It rang 3 times before someone answered.
Yeah, male voice. Rough.
Impatient. This is Alara Vance. Silence. Then,
You got balls, I'll give you that. I want to make a deal. Ain't no deal to be made. $50,000. Cash. You leave me alone, disappear. We never see each other again. A low whistle. 50 grand? You got that kind of money? My boyfriend does. The guy who killed Catherine. Yes. He there with you now? She hesitated. No, he doesn't know I'm calling. Bullshit.
it's the truth. He wants to fight. I want this over, so I'm offering you a way out. More silence. Then muffled voices. He was conferring with the others. Where? He said finally. Downtown. Old parking garage on 5th and Maple. Top level. 1 hour. You come alone? Yes. You bring the money? Yes. And we're supposed to just believe you're going to hand it over and walk away? What choice do I have? You'll find me eventually. This way, everyone gets what they want. Another pause, then 1 hour. You or your boyfriend try anything cute, you're both dead. The line went dead. Alara exhaled shakily, set the phone down, and looked up at the third level where Lucien was hidden. She couldn't see him, but she knew he was there, watching, waiting, ready. She got out of the car and took the stairs to the top level. The top level was open to the sky. No roof, just rusted railings and cracked concrete, and the city lights spreading out in all directions. Wind whipped across the empty space, carrying the smell of rain and exhaust. Alara stood in the center, a duffel bag at her feet, her hands empty and visible. The gun was tucked into the small of her back, hidden beneath her jacket. She waited. Headlights appeared at the entrance ramp. A black SUV climbed slowly to the top level and stopped 50 feet away. The engine idled. Doors opened. 3 men got out. The first was huge, 6'5", probably close to 300 pounds, with a shaved head and a scar running from his temple to his jaw. Marcus Cole. The second was lean and wiry, all sharp angles and nervous energy. Vincent Hayes. The third was somewhere in between, average height, average build, but there was something in his eyes that made Alara's skin crawl. Cold, empty, dead. Reaper. Marcus took a step forward. Where's the money? Alara nudged the duffel bag with her foot. Right here. Show me. She crouched, unzipped the bag, pulled it open. Stacks of bills, real ones on top, newspaper underneath, enough to pass a quick inspection. Marcus's eyes gleamed. Well, I'll be damned. She actually brought it. We have a deal? Alara asked, standing slowly. Maybe. Marcus looked at Vincent, then at Reaper. What do you boys think? Vincent grinned. I think we take the money and kill her anyway. Alara's pulse spiked, but she kept her voice steady. That wasn't the agreement. Yeah, well, agreements change. Marcus pulled a gun from his waistband. See, the thing is, 50 grand's nice. But Catherine was family, and family gets avenged. She tried to kill me. And you killed her, so now we kill you. That's how this works. He raised the gun. A shot rang out. Marcus jerked, a red flower blooming in his shoulder. He spun, trying to track where the shot came from. Another shot. This one caught him in the chest. He went down hard. Vincent dove for cover behind the SUV. Reaper pulled his own gun and fired blindly toward the third level. Alara ran. She made it to a concrete pillar as bullets sparked off the ground behind her. Her heart hammered. Her hands shook. But she got the gun out, checked the safety like Lucien had taught her, and leaned around the pillar. Vincent was moving, trying to flank Lucien's position. She aimed, exhaled, squeezed the trigger. The recoil jolted her arm. The shot went wide. Vincent spotted her, swung his gun around. Lucien's shot caught him in the head. He dropped instantly, 2 down, 1 to go. Reaper was nowhere to be seen. Alara pressed her back against the pillar, breathing hard, trying to listen over the hammer of her pulse. Wind, distant traffic. Nothing else. Then footsteps. Close. Too close. She spun just as Reaper came around the other side of the pillar. He grabbed her wrist, twisted hard. The gun clattered to the ground. His other hand locked around her throat. "Stupid bitch," he hissed. "Did you really think—" A gunshot. His grip loosened. He looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest, then back at Alara with an expression of almost comical surprise. He collapsed. Lucien stood 10 feet away, his gun still raised, his face empty. Alara sagged against the pillar, gasping, her throat aching where Reaper had grabbed her. Lucien crossed to her in 3 strides. "You okay?" She nodded, unable to speak. He pulled her into his arms, one-handed and awkward, but solid and real. "It's over. It's done." Behind them, sirens wailed. Someone had called the police. Lucien pulled back, looked her in the eyes. "We need to go. Right now." "What about—" She gestured at the bodies. "Self-defense, again. But we can't be here when they arrive." He grabbed the duffel bag with his good hand. "Come on." They ran for the stairs. They drove for hours. Out of the city, into the countryside. Through small towns that were nothing but gas stations and dark windows. They didn't talk, didn't make plans, just drove until the adrenaline wore off and exhaustion set in. Finally, as dawn broke over empty farmland, Lucien pulled into a rest stop and killed the engine. They sat in silence, watching the sun climb. "What now?" Alara asked. "I don't know." "You always know." "Not this time." He turned to look at her. "I've spent 3 years doing this, saving people, fixing situations, playing puppet master. And for what? Catherine's dead. Ronan's in prison. 3 more bodies in a parking garage." His voice cracked. "When does it stop?" "When we decide it stops." "And if I don't know how to stop? If this is all I am?" She reached over, took his hand. "Then we figure it out together, one day at a time." He closed his eyes. "I'm so tired, Alara." "I know. I don't want to do this anymore. Don't want to be this person." "Then don't." She squeezed his hand. "Be someone else. With me. Somewhere far away." He opened his eyes, looked at her with an expression so raw it made her chest ache. "You really mean that?" "Yes. Even after everything, even knowing what I've done, especially knowing what you've done." She brought his hand to her lips, kissed his scarred knuckles. "You saved me. In every way a person can be saved. Now let me save you." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her across the console and kissed her, desperate and messy and full of everything they'd been through. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. "Where do we go?" he whispered. "Anywhere. Everywhere. Nowhere." She smiled through tears. "As long as it's together." They sold everything. The penthouse, the car, every asset Lucien had accumulated over 3 years of playing savior. It took 2 weeks and dozens of calls to lawyers and accountants and people who asked no questions and expected no answers. In the end, they had enough to disappear. Really disappear. Alara Vance and Lucien Darko ceased to exist. In their place were Sarah and James Bennett, a couple from nowhere, going anywhere, with no history and no ties. They took a bus to the coast, rented a small apartment above a bookstore in a town where nobody knew their names, got jobs, her at a coffee shop, him at a hardware store. Normal jobs, boring jobs, the kind where you went home at the end of the day without blood on your hands. It was strange at first. Waking up without fear, walking down the street without looking over her shoulder, coming home to an apartment that felt safe instead of like a prison. Lucien struggled more than she did. She'd catch him standing at the window, staring out at nothing, his jaw tight. He'd wake up gasping from nightmares he wouldn't talk about. He'd reach for a gun that wasn't there anymore whenever someone knocked on the door. But slowly, so slowly, he started to relax, started to smile again, to laugh, to be present instead of constantly scanning for threats. 3 months after they arrived, Alara came home from her shift at the coffee shop and found him in the kitchen, attempting to cook dinner. The kitchen was a disaster, flour everywhere, something burning on the stove, and he looked so frustrated and helpless that she burst out laughing. He turned, spatula in hand, covered in batter. "It's not funny. It's hilarious. I followed the recipe exactly." "Did you preheat the oven?" He blinked. "You have to preheat it?" She laughed harder, crossing to him, taking the spatula. Yes, you have to preheat it. Well, that seems like important information they should have mentioned. It's literally the first step. I may have skipped ahead. She shook her head, turned off the stove, and kissed him. You're ridiculous. I was trying to do something nice. I know. She wrapped her arms around his waist. And I love you for it. He held her close, resting his chin on top of her head. I'm not very good at this. At what? Cooking? At being normal. Neither am I. She pulled back to look up at him. So we figure it out. Together. He smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes. Together. 6 months in, Alara enrolled in community college. She didn't know what she wanted to study, didn't have a grand plan, just knew she wanted to learn, to grow, to become something more than she'd been. Lucian started volunteering at a youth center, teaching self-defense classes to at-risk kids. He never talked about his past, never explained why he knew so much about violence and survival, just showed up twice a week and taught kids how to protect themselves. They built a life, small, quiet, unremarkable, and for the first time in either of their lives, that was enough. 1 year after they'd left, Alara got a call from Diana. She almost didn't answer, almost let it go to voicemail, but something made her pick up. I thought I'd never hear from you again, Alara said. I promised I'd keep an eye on things. Diana's voice was warm, familiar. I wanted you to know Ronan took a plea deal. 20 years, no parole. Alara's breath caught. 20 years. The prosecutor had him dead to rights. Multiple assault charges. The attempted murder charge from the warehouse, plus the evidence Lucien's people provided about previous incidents. Diana paused. He's never getting out, Alara. Not in any way that matters. She should feel relief, vindication, something. Instead, all she felt was tired. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything. Are you happy? Diana asked. Alara looked around the small apartment, at the secondhand furniture and the crooked bookshelves and the photos on the wall, her and Lucien at the beach, at a farmer's market, sitting on their tiny balcony drinking coffee. Yeah, she said. I am. Good. You deserve it. After they hung up, Alara sat for a long time, staring at her phone. 20 years. Ronan would be in his 50s when he got out. Gray. Broken. A shell of the man who'd terrorized her. And she would be, what? Someone else entirely. Someone who'd survived. Someone who'd chosen to live instead of just exist. Lucian came home an hour later, smelling like sweat in the gym. He found her on the couch, curled up with a book. Diana called, she said. His expression tightened. What did she want? To tell me Ronan's sentence, 20 years. He sat beside her, took her hand. How do you feel? I don't know. She set the book down. I thought I'd feel something, triumph, relief. But all I feel is empty. That's normal. Is it? Yeah. He pulled her close. Closure isn't what people think it is. It's not this big moment where everything makes sense. It's just the absence of pain, the ability to move forward without constantly looking back. She leaned her head against his shoulder. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. He kissed the top of her head. You taught me it's okay to let go. They sat in comfortable silence as evening fell and the streetlights flickered on outside. Do you ever regret it? She asked, leaving everything behind. No? Not even a little? Not even a little. He tilted her face up to look at him. You're the only thing I've ever done right. Her eyes burned. I'm not that special. Yes, you are. You survived. You fought back. You chose to live. His thumb brushed her cheek. You're the strongest person I know. I'm not. You are. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know it. He kissed her then, slow and sweet and full of promise. And Alara realized something. She wasn't broken anymore. Wasn't the hollow-eyed woman staring at bruises in a bathroom mirror. Wasn't the terrified waitress hiding in plain sight. She was someone new. Someone who'd walked through fire and come out the other side. Someone who'd chosen survival over surrender. Someone who'd found love in the darkest place and held on to it with both hands. She was Alara, and she was free. 2 years later, they got married. Nothing fancy, just a ceremony at the courthouse with Diana as their witness. Cheap rings from a pawn shop, vows they wrote themselves, promising honesty and partnership, and a future built on choice instead of necessity. Afterward, they went to the beach and walked barefoot in the sand until the sun set. "Mrs. Bennet?" Lucian said, testing the name. "Mr. Bennet," she replied, smiling. "Sounds strange." "Everything about us is strange." "True." He stopped, turned to face her. The ocean crashed behind them, painting everything in shades of gold and purple. "But it works." "Yeah." She stood on her toes, kissed him softly. "It does." They stood there as the stars came out, holding each other, while the waves erased their footprints and the past became just another story they told in whispers. Poem. 5 years after they'd disappeared, Alara graduated with a degree in social work. She started working at a women's shelter, helping survivors of domestic violence rebuild their lives. She knew their fear, their shame, their desperate hope that things could get better, because she'd lived it and survived it and come out the other side. Lucian continued at the youth center, expanded the program, brought in counselors and tutors and people who actually cared about giving kids a chance. He never told them about his past, about the women he'd saved, the violence he'd inflicted, the man he used to be. But sometimes, late at night, when they lay tangled together in bed, he'd talk about Sarah, the woman he hadn't saved, the guilt that had driven him, the need to fix broken things because he couldn't fix himself. "Do you think she'd forgive me?" he asked once. "For what?" "For failing her." Alara took his face in her hands. "You didn't fail her. The system failed her. Her husband failed her. You were just one person who tried to help." "I could have done more." "Maybe. Or maybe it wouldn't have mattered. You can't save everyone, Lucian. You can only do your best and hope it's enough." "Is it enough?" She thought about the women she'd helped at the shelter, the kids Lucienne taught, the lives they'd changed simply by being present, by caring. "Yeah," she said, "I think it is." He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. "I love you." "I love you too." And in the darkness, holding each other, they found the peace that had eluded them for so long. 10 years after that night in the parking garage, Alara stood in her office at the shelter and looked at the photos on her wall. Women she'd helped. Success stories. New lives built from the ashes of old ones. And in the center, a photo of her and Lucian on their wedding day, young and scared and hopeful all at once. She traced her finger over his face, smiling. They'd built something good, something real, something that mattered, not because they were perfect, they weren't, not because the past was gone. It wasn't. It lived in Lucian's nightmares and Alara's occasional panic attacks in the way they both still flinched at loud noises, but because they'd chosen each other. Every day. In the big moments and the small ones, through the fear and the doubt and the hard work of healing. They'd chosen love, and that, more than anything, had saved them both. Her phone buzzed, text from Lucian. "Home early, making dinner. Try not to be too impressed." She smiled, typed back, "Is the kitchen on fire yet?" "Not yet." She laughed, grabbed her bag, and headed for the door. Outside, the city hummed with life. Cars honked. People rushed past. Somewhere, someone was suffering. Someone was afraid. Someone was trapped. But somewhere else, someone was healing. Someone was finding courage. Someone was choosing to survive. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Alara walked to her car, drove home through familiar streets, and found Lucian in the kitchen, covered in flour and grinning sheepishly. "I preheated the oven this time," he announced proudly. "Gold star for you." "I'm getting better at this." "You really are." She wrapped her arms around him from behind, pressed her cheek against his back, and breathed in the smell of home, flour and coffee and the faint scent of his cologne. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For choosing me, for staying, for building this with me." He turned in her arms, cupped her face, looked at her with eyes that still held shadows but also held light. "There was never any other choice," he said. "From the moment I saw you, it was always going to be you." She kissed him then, soft and slow, pouring everything she felt into it,
gratitude and love and hope, and the bone-deep certainty that they were going to be okay because they'd survived together.
And that was the only ending that mattered. The end. In a city ruled by power and fear, two broken people found each other in the darkness and chose to build something light. They didn't get a perfect ending, but they got a real one, a life built on honesty and choice and the hard work of healing, a love forged in fire and tempered by time. And in the end, that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.